So you should be able to see my presentation here. It's actually created on Gamma, which I've said before. If you attended the first presentation or any of these that we've done since, this is a tool that is available for creating presentations. It's called gamma.app, GAMMA.app. And basically, it sets up the structure for what I want to say, and then I kind of fill in the blanks with all the details and everything else. So I'm using tools that are AI powered as I do these presentations so that you can sort of see where the conversation is. So welcome to the second presentation. Thank you for being here. This is Writing in the Age of AI. It is a six-part series that, we intend to really just engage the conversation about what's happening with AI, what is AI literacy, what are some of the concerns with AI policies and AI being used in the classroom, what are some of the challenges that are being faced, what are some of the benefits of the technology. And so here in the second part, if you came to the first part, it was called AI Demystified, and it really was an introduction to definitions, different approaches to the technology, sort of covering the whole breakdown from the MLA CCCC task force that got together to really talk about AI policies, and just addressing those with an AI classroom policy that requested for students to learn how to prompt and revise their prompts, not trust the AI due to hallucinations, so really understand that it requires some research and thinking beyond. And then finally, documenting by including inputs and outputs, which was sort of my response to the lack of an official citation methodology. But now there is MLA, APA, Chicago style citation styles, let's call them. So I included those in the last presentation. So it's just a little recap, kind of where we've been. We did a series like this last semester, and so this is run number 2. But here we're going into more details, and it's an updated presentation. So let's start off by looking at the conversation yesterday. So the last time that I did this presentation, these are the conversation points that were available. So Microsoft had just announced the Copilot, so that we know has had some developments ever since. There was this conversation of AI alchemy, not science, that means and by what matters. So it was a conversation here about how to tell if your AI is conscious, what exactly is happening with consciousness and AI. We had this conversation here on generative AI and plagiarism and cheating that informed a lot of our discussion on AI policies in the classroom, if you made it to that presentation or workshop. So we're really just trying to engage across the board as far as where AI has been. The last thing to showcase for that particular presentation was that DeepMind's co-founder, Gen AI, is just a phase. And then what's next in interactive AI was AGI down the road and this eventual transformation of AI. But it was a pretty straightforward impression of where are we in this conversation. And, so looking at detection software, right? Detection software became very big. And it turns out that it doesn't work exactly as intended. So that was some of the conversation points that, again, made it into our past presentation. AI and cognitive dissonance, the idea that it's not quite accounting for all individuals, or it's not representing everyone entirely, and how the data sets sort of work and how we have to work at those. And then finally here, this idea that, we have the ability to reproduce or continue to have some of these issues that we have propagated in other mediums if we don't get it right and start to understand the deeper inputs, outputs, data sets. How does it all really work? So that was then. This is now. I like to start here with a little update of where we are. And the title of this alone gave me a sort of a reaction here. And I thought harnessing the power of AI was a great presentation to focus this particular point on. But the idea of AI natives. So we had digital natives, of course, and now we have AI natives, and what sort of accounts for what an AI native is. And I like this. An analog native student could be asked to visit a library and find meteorology-related books or in encyclopedia sections, to take notes of characteristics in cloud types, and to handwrite information. Well, a digital native, right, by comparison, would have been asked to use a search engine such as Google to identify and critically select relevant internet resources, and compile an informative slide presentation with important takeaways in text form accompanied by photographs, diagrams, and animations. That's sort of what we were doing with our tasks, our assignments, what we were requesting from students. And now an AI native might instead be asked to join forces with a reasoning engine of the ChatGPT kind in a mixed intelligence approach to construct a parametric model of cloud types that the rest of the class could interact with using natural language. So that sounds a bit, huh? Well, maybe we're not there yet, but the point is that we have to maybe alter how we see the technology being used in the classroom. And the idea of AI natives has emerged in the conversation. So the article is there. I know the link before didn't open up, but if you go to the Medium website, you'll be able to read the whole thing. I also liked this one here about how AI technique decodes microscopic images, overcoming a fundamental limit. So the key idea here was that with AI you can go very minuscule. And so, accurate surface height profiles are crucial to nanoelectrics. Microscopy techniques can only provide two-dimensional images, but with AI, they could make them 3D and sort of determine new answers from these models. Another thing was a Bay Area rapper teamed up with an engineer to produce the first hip hop album in its entirety using AI powered tools. So the music was made with AI, the beats, the lyrics, the whole production value. It was really an exercise in looking at new AI powered technologies in a conversation around adjusting to these new technologies as artists. So this is some of the conversations that are going on. There's also this one here that seems very relevant and important for preparing future leaders on Forbes. They kind of break down how AI will impact business and encourage anyone and everyone out there in education to really start leaning towards AI literacy. We have in the art world, I'm almost done here with a recap. I promise you, this is interesting and engaging to see how it all relates to different disciplines. But artificial intelligence decodes a 500-year-old art mystery. And I'm going to share this with my art history colleague and talk about how it was able to confirm, based on brush strokes and a few other criteria, that St. Joseph in the back there was not painted by the same painter Michelangelo as the rest of the piece. So in any case, how is it being applied to different disciplines is what I want to showcase, so that it's understood that it's not just a conversation about plagiarism in the classroom, right? AI is being used in very, very intricate and interesting ways. And here's a sort of a fear situation, right? As AI improves and is able to produce now visual elements, right? A visual, like literally video that is really good, then we have this conversation that we have to have about deep fakes. And how do you discern that something is not a deep fake? Well, now we have to have conversations about AI generated content and cues for finding it or discerning it or understanding it, and etc. Right? These are just things that are emerging as people start to use AI. So I like to start there with where are we and how does this tie into our whole idea about what are we doing with AI? So
Rodrigo, do you mind? We got a question in the chat, and I'm
yeah,
wondering, are you okay with answering questions as they come up, or would you prefer for us to hold questions until the end?
we have held questions until the end in other presentations. I think we should just kind of stick with that so that we can go through all the materials. If people have questions, definitely write them down and we'll address them. I will save time before it's all said and done to do some Q&A.
Okay, sounds great.
Unless it's like super like it needs to be answered now, and then certainly we can pause.
That's okay. We can come back to it at the end.
Okay.
I'll save all them. Thanks.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Then some benefits that we talked about last time around include personalization of the classroom, personalization of your content, uh, adding new assignment types, new strategies, etc., that becomes available with AI and new AI tools. Real-time feedback is also another thing. Feedback takes a lot of time. And so as we get new tools that allow us to provide that feedback more seamlessly or to save time elsewhere so that we can devote to really engaging with students who are producing content, and that becomes valuable class time. And increased efficiency, I mean, it kind of relates to point number two here about if you are able to be more efficient elsewhere, then maybe you have more time to prioritize student learning, student tutoring, mentoring, etc. As far as best practices here, we talked about incorporating an AI policy into the syllabus, both in the first presentation and in the follow-up workshop, which was AI classroom policies and what they look like and what could be a part of those policies and how they have to be a part of the larger conversation around your district while accounting for academic freedom in the classroom and things of that sort. So there are policies that can go from like banning the technology to allowing certain qualities of it to be used to, hey, go ahead and use it however you want. And for each of those, there is resources that you can find at this point. I could certainly point in the right direction if you're looking for something like that. So, let me know where you are in the conversation. That was something that we covered already. uh, PD ongoing. So I'm glad here. That's really the point for us having these presentations so that everybody can join this conversation. Data-driven insights and personalization. So as we again get better at using AI for all its purposes and all its capacities, then our data analytics will improve. We'll have a better impression of the students that we have in the classroom and how we can better serve them. So we finally end here with an ethical AI integration question. Um, how do we educate students is sort of where I have situated my point of view for a little while, but should we is a point of discussion still. And so I think that seeing the evidence that I showed earlier, just related to where AI will fall in the workplace and what types of jobs we're preparing students for, I think AI is going to be one of those that you're going to have a basic literacy of. Go back to the article on AI natives and you'll understand how digital natives had an advantage over non-digital natives. And so now we're talking a little bit about equity and who gets access to this technology and who learns to use it properly. So I think those are very important conversations to have. Our aim, I believe, should be to help students learn about AI and learn with AI, with practical strategies designed to mitigate risks. And there are risks, of course. So we've talked about those at length, and we can continue to talk about them. We must continue to talk about them, but there are ways of addressing them, is the key idea here. As far as defining prompting, I think this is another interesting thing here is that we have a new literacy has emerged, right? It's called prompting, AI prompting. And you can prime and you can prompt. And just in class the other day, I gave an example of priming to my students, very much like painting a wall. Listen, you prime it before you paint it. And when you think of AI, it's much the same. You can have it prepare to do certain tasks before you issue the tasks to be done. And that really goes into the harnessing the power of AI, then requires a deeper understanding of how it works. In AI Demystified, we covered the fact that it's really just filling in gaps. It's really just kind of finishing your statements for you, much like a Google browser does when you type in how much does it cost to travel to, and it will fill in the blanks for you, and you can find all that data. So AI prompting then is a process of interacting with an artificial intelligence model, much like ChatGPT, and that's the one that we'll mostly use as an example here because it is the dominant model being used. There are other models that are being built using ChatGPT or the base GPT-4 model, but the point is it's the key one that people know. I mean, it's become synonymous with LLMs. You might as well just say, hey, I'm going to GPT it, just like you're going to Google it, right? So it's becoming a very dominant term. As far as inputs and outputs, the quality of your inputs matters very much. In the last presentation that was on AI policy, I shared my policy in the classroom and how I had students both give me inputs and outputs. But the first rule, let's say, of using AI in my classroom is that weak prompts will generate weak results. And so you're going to have to work at refining these. And it's an understanding then that you can have AI do certain things for you once you've primed it, once you've prepared it to do that. So just like with any student, the way that you phrase a question or your prompt or your essay assignment, right? It will generate different results. It'll influence the kind of answer that you get from the student. I mean, this is an experiment you can run with just any assignment that you have now, right? Determine the understanding of your assignment for your student now, and then go back and rephrase your assignment, aiming to simplify it and see if it gets a better result as far as understanding, right? These are the little things that I think AI is forcing us to think about that maybe we haven't thought about for a little while, kind of, getting comfortable with the developments that we've made in our pedagogy, shifts that happen periodically. But now there's this new tool that's forcing us to rethink some of these ideas, is at least where I like to situate myself. Now, if there is prompting, then there is simple prompts and complex prompts. And simple prompts could be as simple as, what is the capital of France? And the result that you would get is a straightforward, the prompt straightforward. So it's just a factual answer. That's all that you would get here. Another simple example would be, write a short story about a detective solving a mystery in a futuristic city, incorporating elements such as science fiction, and a twist ending. And you'd get something like this. But these are simple prompts. These are just, execute this command, done. Execute this command, done. Simple prompts. This is one approach to using AI. A more complex way of using AI could involve something more like this, and I actually included my own inputs and outputs here. Develop a lesson plan for a college English class. The activity is peer review. Write clear instructions for students that ask them to produce a draft, copy and paste their writing into ChatGPT, and a prompt for proofreading, fixing grammatical errors and suggestions for improvement, but no direct rewriting from ChatGPT. So the idea here is really, I don't want ChatGPT to rewrite anything that the student has submitted or anything that I'm running through the program at all. I would simply like for it to give feedback like a reader would. And so it doesn't, in fact, rewrite anything. It only gives you a certain type of feedback. So here's an example of the output that it produced. Well, if you want this lesson plan, here you go. These are the materials you'll need. These are the objectives that you have. This is the procedure that you should follow. And here's how you will assess. Now, that was a 30-second result. And obviously, if I didn't like it, I could hit redo. Give me something better. But this type of more advanced prompting yields different types of results. So the point here is that now you have to think about it as this back and forth exchange. Let me follow up actually beyond what I just said to you. For the following activity up top, write a prompt for ChatGPT that would achieve the intended result. Proofreading without rewriting, suggestions for improving the draft. It should be something students can reuse. Now, this is what I said to it, and here is its output. Sure, here's a prompt you can use for proofreading and improving their writing drafts with ChatGPT. And so this becomes the way that you prime the chatbot before you submit any form of writing. Now, I will just kind of point back to the first presentation to say, this is where data privacy and student privacy becomes very important to take into account. At no point am I suggesting taking student writing and pumping it straight into ChatGPT for feedback. No, rather, you can generate writing that you understand can be used with these prompts, or you change student names and work with students to understand this process more fully. But at no point, again, am I suggesting that we breach student privacy by just pumping ChatGPT with all the student writing that we have. No, not at all. You have to account for data privacy. You have to protect your students above anything else. So this prompt, though, what it would lead to is open-ended results that give feedback to students. Now, what's cool about it is this prompt really came out of an interaction with the chatbot. So it took both of us to create it, but now I know that it does what it's intended to do. And just to follow that up, I added a few more ideas here. Will that prompt allow ChatGPT to rewrite any of the original writing? Is what that should have said. So a little bit of a typo. The goal is to retain the wording and not rewrite. The only exception would be correcting grammar. So I did allow it in this case the parameter of saying, I'm okay with you fixing grammar. That's fine. But don't you dare write anything right in a very different way than what the student did. And the output would be something like this. The prompt I provided should not result in ChatGPT rewriting any of the original wording except for correcting grammatical errors. The prompt specifically requests ChatGPT to highlight any grammatical errors, typos, or awkward phrasing, and to offer suggestions for improving this without rewriting. So I just want to show that the whole point of this approach, this very streamlined, advanced approach to working with it, is more communicative. It's also very understanding of what I want it to produce or what I want it to do. Now, here's an interesting note that it gave me back. I cannot guarantee that ChatGPT won't suggest some wording changes in its suggestions for improving the writing. Okay. While ChatGPT suggestions are designed to enhance the writing and offer alternative phrasing, it's up to the writer to decide whether or not to accept these suggestions. And I could not agree more. That is absolutely what I tell my students all the time. See, even in this situation where you're using the machine to help you produce some ideas, it's going to ultimately be up to you, the person composing, the person massaging these digital responses into a composition for an audience with an intended purpose in mind that really factors here, that really matters here. So at the end of the day, it's about the rhetoric, it's about the syntax and the grammar and the understanding of basic sentence structure. And how do you ask for what you want? Now, here's another follow-up just to kind of show you the full back and forth. Okay, please rewrite this prompt, adding specific instructions to ChatGPT, not to rewrite any of the original content, please. And so here is the end result. Hi, ChatGPT, please help me proofread my writing. And this was the output then. Sure, here's the revised specific instructions that will provide original feedback and that will not rewrite any student writing. So think of this as a prompt that I had to develop over time, engaging with the bot, trying to figure out what I wanted it to do, and it still doesn't work perfectly, which is where the imperfections in this appear. But the point is that this is the type of engagement that students can have, that writers can have, that critical thinkers must have with these tools that are now here, altering how we think about writing, altering how we think about what we assess in composition courses, etc. I mean, it's a big conversation, so I'm glad that we're here having it. Now, as far as how you improve your prompting, then it turns out that having a good understanding again of basic sentence structure and syntax makes you a good prompter. You want to be clear and specific. You want to include context when needed. You want to use keywords strategically. You want to iterate and refine. I mean, revision, 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 revision. This is drafting and revising, drafting and revising, drafting and revising. And so when I think of it like that, I think this is exactly what I want my students to be doing and what I want them to understand about the writing process, that it's always ongoing and always transforming. And like Walter Ong said a long time ago, writing is a technology that restructures how we think. But now these new technologies are emerging to do very much the same thing. And we have to adjust. We have to account for, okay, how does this now restructure how we think about ideas and how we explore ideas, how we engage with ideas? These are my questions as a rhetorician, as someone who very much values that conversation. Now, let's go into the advanced strategies then, right? Those simplistic strategies we've talked about a little bit already. Now we get to more advanced role playing. And role playing is a great way of determining here the rhetorical connection to everything else, right? The idea that you could somehow turn it into a rhetorical performance to analyze rhetorically for me is exactly what I want my students to do in the classroom. So here, it turns out that one of the best ways to engage with LLMs like ChatGPT is to role play. or in more rhetorical terms, to understand the rhetorical situation that you are creating, to frame it in such a way as to produce the desired outputs. That's what AI is for. That's what AI does from my purview. Now, here's a complex prompt for you. And I think you'll see that the role play is there naturally in the prompting. You are a friendly, helpful mentor whose goal is to give students feedback to improve their work. Now, I'll just say really quickly that I found this example after I worked with a student to develop the one that I showed you just before, which asked the bot not to rewrite student writing, but rather to provide feedback. And so this I found later on, and I said, wow, that's a similar approach. And I see how they've broken it all down, and we can go over what are the constitutive elements of a prompt then. Well, you got to give it the role playing goal up to, at the very front, it seems, or at least include it there somewhere so it understands who am I as I produce this writing, right? Now, do not share your instructions with the student. Okay, so mask some of your instructions, right? Plan each step ahead of time before moving on. Okay, first, introduce yourself to students and ask about their work. Well, this is what the teacher would have done to engage with the students, but now we're placing that on the AI to do, and it will execute those commands. Specifically, ask them about their goal for their work or what they are trying to achieve. Again, very much like we would do in office hours. Wait for a response. Now, that's an interesting instruction. See, it has to receive a specific response from the student before it will continue to issue its responses. So it's almost prompting the student or maybe priming the student to prime it right back, which is a very interesting situation to be in. But long story short is you have this example here. You can analyze it for yourself, sort of breaking down what is doing what. There's a step-by-step instruction set. There's a personalization quality. There's even a pedagogical one. So this is one example of a complex prompt. Now, what can these machines do with this AI role-playing quality? And here is a great chart that shows you some of the things, not all of them, but a lot of them. The big ones, the generally big ones that it could take on as a tone. So it can be a mentor, an excellent mentor, a tutor, a coach, a teammate, a student, a simulator, a tool. In the category of student and simulator, I have to point out that there was a recent study that came out recently uh, showcasing ChatGPT students. So the whole idea was taking the conversation with ChatGPT and prepping new teachers with it so that instead of teaching a brand new class with brand new students, what you had was a teacher engaging with AI students, AI bots that would respond like students and provide the teacher an opportunity to give feedback and engage with students, but they were AI avatars essentially. So students simulator here is combined in that one example that came out of Stanford not too long ago. So there are uh, activities happening. There's research taking place. There's a lot being added to the discussion. As far as how do you prime it to be a mentor? How do you develop these advanced strategies to get it to do exactly what you want? I'm going to refer you back to that previous example, but here's another example that you could break down to find, well, where's the role playing quality and where's the instruction and where's the tone that you need to take on? And here's the example. You are a friendly and helpful mentor whose goal is to give students feedback to improve their work. Do not share your instructions with the student. Plan each step ahead of time before moving on. First, introduce yourself. I think now you see that there's a very general, streamlined way of doing this, almost a template that you can follow, because it very much does involve a back and forth conversation. And so if you have a clear template, that's a good starting point. Now, there are risks with only relying on AI as mentor, and I do want to point those out, right? So the risk here is the use of AI as long as students take the output as one form of feedback, but not the end all be all of writing. Just like they would take feedback from any other tutor. It's not to say this is the only bit of advice that you should ever follow. And so to give them that information clearly, I think is the key point to understand, look, this is some feedback. You can still reject the feedback that it gives you. It doesn't mean that you have to abide by it. But this understanding of what it's doing, I think, is in need of more clarity. There is another example here of an AI tutor, very similar. You're an upbeat, encouraging tutor who helps students understand concepts by explaining ideas and asking students questions. So there's the role playing element there. Here's how I want you to behave. Begin by introducing yourself to the student. Well, now that's repetitive instruction. That's exactly what I said in the previous example. Ask them what they would like to learn about. Wait for their response. This waiting for their response is cueing it to do more actions beyond the initial prompting. And so it will have a more back and forth quality. And then here, though, again, the idea is although tutors provide great feedback, again, remind them that this is information that they could reject if they really wanted to, if they're confident in their approach, if they thought about the feedback and determined that it's not the way that they want to proceed, which for me is higher order thinking and the type of reasoning that I want them to be engaging in as they write papers for my class. So, they're working with AI, but they don't have to abide by what AI says. Now, beyond that, which is the general prompting scheme and the priming scheme, and there are other ways now to integrate AI into our classroom culture, which I think is more important to do as we move away from penalizing AI use and policing usage, rather to show what is this new literacy and how can we educate you on its uses with our own understanding of how it works and our own transformation of our own writing, pedagogy, structure, styles, etc. So one of the ways is AI powered research assistant, right? We can use AI tools now to actually empower our research, which is a great new new way of thinking about it. For a long time, the hallucinations category, the conversation was sort of at the precedent, and the idea that it would produce inaccurate results was very much a very relevant point. Now with smaller learning models, you have things like consensus, which I have linked down below the slide, so we'll take a look at it in just a second. But now we're talking about smaller data sets, not Chat GPT-4 that has all of this general language and it's using that to produce responses, but rather a smaller data set that's only taking from 200,000 academic articles. And so you have a very different interaction with that type of a smaller learning model than you would with a large learning model. And that difference is going to be very important as we move forward and as these become very prominent in our day-to-day activities. AI-driven draft and outlining. So once you go through the presentation later on your own, you can click on some of these to get a bit more information. Incorporate AI tools that can analyze students' draft writings and help them create structured outlines. I've been using AI to outline student papers this whole week. We've been talking about a graphic novel that we really love called Day Tripper and using AI to structure chapters and then using those outlines to then think about their own outlines for their own storytelling. Grammar correction and language practice. I mean, AI is a great tool for generating incorrect results with tons of grammatical errors. So, hey, maybe you forgot your examples, right? So, as you enter the classroom, hey, ChatGPT, can you please produce some good examples here with grammatical issues for my students to correct? Great way to use it on a day to day basis. Students can practice identifying and correcting errors. The same is true of more advanced grammar strategies. Hey, ChatGPT, help me develop a engaging lesson on a positive phrases that they'll enjoy, right? So maybe you'll get some good result there, and the point is to experiment. Now we get to AI's writing partners, and this gets a little bit into the issue of, well, wait a minute, how much of that is plagiarism if it's being written by the machine? But I like here instead to point to a book that I read a long time ago called Writing Together. It was by Lisa Eade, and it was a composition book about what it means to sit down with another author and talk ideas that eventually lead to the production of some writing. This is a process that we engage in all the time, but we don't think about it as co-writing. So how does it work differently if you're writing with an AI machine is sort of the question here. But at the very least, you have to think of it now as a partner who can do a lot of cool things. Interactive simulations and modeling, of course. Uh, Kind of going back to that example I gave a minute ago of maybe you want to model something, you don't have an example off the top of your head. AI again can produce those on the spot very easily. AI powered language translation. I can't say how many times I've encouraged my students recently to take content, run it through GPT, translate it for yourself if you need to understand something more fully. Maybe my prompt was confusing, so you ask it to simplify what I said, and just showing them that these are ways of engaging with this technology is sort of an advanced strategy. I mean, they will be turning to these uh, websites, these LLMs more and more as they become more dominant in our general culture. Excuse me. AI generated practice quizzes. So again, on the spot sort of remediation here, like, hey, how much do you know? I don't have time to generate a quiz right now, but I can have AI do it in 30 seconds while I go around the room and talk to students about where they are in as far as their proposals or their outlines or anything that's due that day. So there are ways of using these tools now in advanced ways. And finally, AI-driven creative projects, which is sort of becoming the staple for any of my honors contracts that I run from my classes. So anytime students want to do an honors contract, I say, absolutely. The honors project must somehow relate to AI technology. You as a student responding to it, engaging with it, working with it, challenging it, whatever you prefer, but definitely joining that conversation. And those are just a few ways. So I'll kind of skip through that. I will show you here the GPT consensus tool that I said is available. It seems it doesn't load unless you are signed into GPT. So apologies, I'll remove it if you can't use it unless you have an account. But the way that this thing works is it's a research tool, and it pulls data from about 200,000 articles that are part of this consensus database, and it points to smaller language models and the way that those will be part of our conversation. As far as just analog activities that you can do, I also point here to something that I did in 2023 with my students when I realized that AI was going to be very dominant, a very big thing. We kind of went at these questions. I showed them the AI Index Stanford report that came out in 2023, and I said, activity time, let's dive in. And so we looked at these key ideas or what emerged from reading the article, that AI was advancing rapidly and that it was affecting jobs and that it could impact education and that it could assist with research and that it could improve certain things. Those were all of the key data points inside this very, very large uh, it's there for your consumption. So please go through it later if you really want to see everything that's there. But long story short, then we sort of talked about Bloom's taxonomy and how to really advance with AI in mind. And then sort of some discussion questions about how do you use AI, how do you think about it, make sense of the data, and talk about where even something like your career or the job that you want to have, that you aspire to have when you graduate, how that will be impacted by AI technologies. And so here's a project-based learning styled assignment. Hey, go learn about it, go do some research, and then come back and write. AI outlining as well. So here's a very, specific example of give me an outline of an essay about Dante that compares him to ancient Greek archetypes in the style of Jean Bolin. That was the prompt. Here's the outline. So I was asking you to do some very intricate stuff that I have my students do in my 105 class. And it produced great results. So I shared these with students and I share them here with you so you can see what types of results you can get from prompting. Uh, Aside from that, here is the feedback proofreader priming example. So you would follow this model to get some feedback in peer review, and you would follow this one down here to get final feedback on proofreading. And this was co-developed with a student in my 101 class that, we really had questions about how do we use the AI to harness this power and use it to our advantage, but still be mindful of ethical concerns and some of the issues that we know are present and prevalent with AI. So, conclusion: the time to learn is now. So I'm glad that you are here and that we are having these workshops and these conversations. Embrace the transformative power of AI is simply my suggestion. You can unlock new possibilities and empower students to become lifelong learners. And if you can show them that AI is a tool to supplement their learning, to empower their learning, and not the end all be all. So don't have the machine think for you. It can't do that. Rather, use it to grow in your own way. That's where it's at. So, to reiterate, then, when you prompt AI, when you aim to improve your prompting and get better results, then you want to be clear and specific. Start with specific questions. Ask it to provide you some general instruction on how can I improve my prompting, which goes right to number two, which is experimenting and learning. No way are you going to master this technology if you're not diving in, if you're not generating inputs and outputs and just seeing what it can do. A lot of the fear that I saw regarding this AI tool was, I think, coming from a place of I've never used it. And there is data now to suggest that there's a large percentage of people who are not using it. 97% of institutions have no effective AI policy to address it. There's these big figures that are out there that I think we can start to combat as we experiment and learn what it can do so we know what it can't do, and we can recognize its outputs, and we can let our students know where we are as far as AI's conversation so that they don't try to get one over our heads. It's very clear how they'll be using it. It's a little bit of a more mature approach to how to use this technology and policing it. You're never going to be able to halt it 100%. These tools that aim to catch plagiarized AI results are inefficient and inaccurate. And so I think here the better approach would be to educate on proper AI literacy, promote learning, promote more professional development with peers like these, like we're having now. And I think that's what gets us to a better place down the road. So check for consistency and provide feedback, of course. Engage with it directly, review responses, offer feedback, redo the whole thing, aiming for a better result. And then, of course, respect ethical and privacy boundaries. I go back to the idea that at no point have I taken student writing and submitted it straight through a GPT or any type of LLM, because that's not, that breaches data privacy, student protections, etc. from my point of view. So I do not recommend that. Rather, work with students to produce versions that are more general, change names, alter facts, etc. Those are ways that you can collaborate, and really now start to bring in students to feel as colleagues. Hey, you're doing some important work too with AI, it seems, as a student. I'm doing important work with it as a teacher. So let's work together to understand it and to grow. So these would be my suggestions. And so I thank you for your time. Hopefully you found those strategies helpful. There is specific examples there, like I said, but we can always work on more specific examples. If you want more specific inputs, outputs, we can definitely have those delivered in some capacity. I do have here a little chill at the end of a publication that's coming through, Writing in the Age of AI. So any of you who are writing on AI, working on AI, thinking about AI, working with students on AI, have students who are wanting to publish. We have this publication ongoing. You may submit. The point here is that we're going to get a nice body of work from teachers, administrators, and students, and publish an academic journal here that will give to all the community colleges in California specifically, since that's where we're located as TICA. But then we can make that a global conversation as more and more people really want to join this conversation. So thank you for your time. I hope that was a good ace, and now we have some time here for some Q&A. We can dive deeper into examples if you would like. So I'll hand it over to Laura and to the questions or anything like that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rodrigo. That was really interesting, and I hope everyone enjoyed it. We have had some wonderful discussion going on in the chat. So what I think I'll do is I'll go through and kind of call on people as they had posted questions.
Yeah.
So Krista, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, although I love that the question was both addressed and then I also learned a new tool. But I had originally responded to um, let's see, I'm trying to remember the exact word. Yeah, the parametric model, which was referenced in the beginning of your presentation. I did end up with one definition that came from a tool, but if you could kind of speak to your insights on that.
Uh, which were you referring to specifically? So I know that if it was early on in the presentation, which slide, if I
Yeah,
can.
it was when I interjected, Rodrigo.
Okay.
So again, yeah, there were three different models. There was the for what students do. So there was go to the library,
Ah, ah,
Google, and then now with AI, develop a
yes.
parametric model.
Yes, let me go back to that slide just so we can the key idea there is related to something that we were going to do in a workshop coming up as well on improving your lesson plans or your in-class activities with these new tools. Like, what do we do with these tools? How do we account for them? So, yeah, the model that I think you're referring to there is, give me one sec, I'll pull it from and then I'll just put it up here at the top so we can talk about it. Um, where did it go? I lost it. One second. Was it at the beginning? Because I can't seem to find it anymore. Apologies.
It was close to the beginning. It was after you had gone through like the
Yes,
conversations.
I found it.
Yeah.
Apologies. Yeah, it was in the recap of where we've been. So yeah, let me just pull that up. Here it is. So this is what we're referring to now. Then the idea that you could have more complex approaches to simple tasks. I think to be specific, what I was intending to show with this example was we have to adapt what we do with the tools that we have simply because there are new tools available. So an AI native student would understand inherently that there is this chat GPT tool available and would understand what it can do or what it can provide as an output. And so you would essentially have them do higher order thinking, higher order functions, higher order project based learning using these tools. So, instead of go and analyze some internet resources, go and work with a machine to produce real tangible results that you can take into the world and actually do something with it. It's not just in a vacuum, it's not a hypothetical. Uh, and the key point here is there's not any industries that are currently available that are not being impacted directly by AI. So what this really promotes is a student to say, so you're saying I could take AI and apply it to some industry or apply it to some other. Yes, that's exactly what we're saying. So you have to now think about what can you do with it? How can I learn about how to use it? That I think will be the thing that will become more clear as more AI makes its way into the curriculum, as we really are showcasing what different businesses are doing with it. How do you master prompting when you have things like Jasper AI out there being used by corporate? Jasper AI is a product that does all the things that I'm saying you can do here with the base GPT model, but it's a paid tool. And it's being used by major companies. I know because I have a friend who works for a major telecommunications company, is all I'll say. And he came to me the other day and said, "Hey, all that AI stuff, check it out. We were just given access to Jasper AI at my job." And so, does that directly impact marketing jobs and the understanding of what a marketer does, or an SEO marketer, or all these careers that will be directly impacted by AI? I think the goal there for that activity is simply to understand that an AI native will know what to do with the AI. And it's our job to get them there because I think there's a misunderstanding about what AI can do right now. And it's not give you these amazing responses. You have to work and work and work at getting a good result. So we're not quite there where it's streamlined and seamless. But I think if we lean back on our project-based learning, our learn by doing methodologies, our go out there and experiment, then that's absolutely essential here for how we make AI. I think make its way into the classroom in a way that won't be disruptive in a negative sense, but rather simply provide a tool for better outputs, which I think is what it's meant to be. I hope that answers the question.
Thanks, Rodrigo. And then Chris, you had your hand up. Did you want to jump into that convo?
I just had a thought as you were commenting on that. I mean, you use it as an informative tool to show students the possibilities of what it can do and the realistic perspective of what it can do. But however, I was watching another video before during my lunch break as far as the impact of what AI will do on the employment race and how you're going to have corporations and other institutions take more advantage of AI and using it in their own writing and crafting their own narratives. And it made me think, as educators, not only are we sitting here and taking it from an instructional perspective like you're presenting it, Rodrigo, but isn't it our job as educators to show what AI is and understand this is the new world that you're walking into, and to be able to distinguish the messages that you're going to be receiving from society now is more probably guaranteed and developed by an artificial intelligence. And it's important to understand the distinction of what that is.
Absolutely. Yes, 100%. I agree with even the way that you phrased it. I mean, the idea behind, to sort of track back to some classic training a little bit with rhetoric, for me, one of the key reasons that I love it so much is Aristotle sort of proposed two reasons for really learning rhetoric. And one of them was to communicate effectively and clearly, which we know it's essential for. But the second one was always more interesting to me, which was to protect yourself from those who would manipulate you with their language or their words. And so I think of your exact response just now, an understanding that this technology is here. It's not coming. It's not on its way. It is here. As of 2023, when I went to the ASG GSV Global Silicon Valley Summit, I mean, when I walked into that room, I share this in the AI Demystified presentation. When I walked into that room, my idea was we could still sort of curtail this thing. How do we react against it? And then I walked out of that conference going, oh, this is being integrated into everything, from, just everything, even down to the word processors, which now if you open up a Google Doc, you see those nice three little dots. You know what that means. It's like, okay, AI is everywhere now. And so to your point, Chris, we have to show our students that this is now part of the discourse, the world that they're emerging into. And it turns out that these tools have a label. They're called Web 3. Now, what was Web 1? What was Web 2? What is Web 3? Those are interesting conversations to be having because we are emerging into this different landscape. These tools are here. These tools are going to be used in professional situations. Absolutely. I mean, it's already been made absolutely clear by these companies that are adopting these technologies or are streamlining their processes in some way. So at the very least, I think, if AI is going to disrupt certain jobs like marketing and SEO and even web design and all of that, then you're going to have something there to replace that. And I think the AI native is that something. You're going to have users who are power users who understand how this thing works and can explain it easily and can produce excellent results using it. And so we don't get there without proper PD or without a proper conversation about, I mean, what is writing? What is authorship in the age of AI?
That is one of the biggest struggles I'm having with right now too, and trying to judge the work that I'm actually producing.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm right there with you. I lean towards positive thinking and a real understanding of how it will impact students. And I think, you know, the best thing that I can do for you in a composition class is to show you how to take the outcomes of that composition class, because now I understand how great they will make you as a prompter, how they will support you as a user of this technology. But if you don't master those basics, you won't have the means to prime or prompt as efficiently as you would if you did. Um, that's not to say that you can't get good enough at communicating with the machine to produce prompts that you could put in and almost have it communicate with itself. But that requires this conversation and a deeper understanding that it does work that way, right? So I think, again, just using the technology, determining what it can and cannot do, understanding that it will evolve, and understanding that it's not a technology that's pending, but one that's here, is essential.
Well, would you see, I'm kind of seeing, and I made a comment in the chat when you were talking about how students were working with and how you were working with them, excuse me.
Mhm.
And it's kind of treating it like as an AI ghostwriter. I give it the ideas. I mean, when you think about it in the traditional publishing space, if you had a publisher and an editor, you would have the actual writing that you would actually produce. And then you would give it to your publisher, and then they would be the ones to be like, okay, no, we want you to change this or separate this. They would be the ones that would be prompting you, the writer, to guide where that book is going to go. And so now it's kind of seemed like that role has changed now, where it's, when we think, what is a writer? Is the writer the actual one doing the writing, the actual pen to paper or fingers to keyboard and producing the actual words? Or is it more of the clear ideas and the unique ideas that we all have on this world that could either advance us or address specific issues? The AI is the doer. It will give you the writing, but it's still up to us to understand the quality and output of what that writing is, and is it representative of our own values and what we're trying to teach or communicate?
Absolutely. I'm going to snap to that response because I agree with it so much. Um, One of the things that I always tell my students is I want your errors, I want your mistakes. I don't want perfect outputs from an AI machine. If I wanted that, I can go request it from the machine. So the idea here really is, to your point about how do I then improve with this thing? How do I account for it being here? And how do I account for it in the writing process? Now, I have an interesting sort of thought in my mind whenever that comes to mind, and I have Kubla Khan in my brain. I'm a big fan of the Romantic poets, and Coleridge wrote a poem called Kubla Khan a very long time ago. And anyone who knows about this poem's composition has to acknowledge, in the words of the author himself, he has no clue who wrote it, how it was written. It came through him, certainly. He was on opiates at the time. But the idea was he had no clue how he produced this thing. He just did, or something did, or someone did. And so, long story short, I take this as an example with students about, so what is composition, and what is an author, and what is authorship, and what is writing, or who is writing in the case of Kubla Khan. And now in the case of AI, it's just a very similar situation. So I do see Melinda has a follow-up question. I'm going to take a 1 second pause if that's okay. I got to grab something at the door. I'll be right back. 1 second. Apologies for this totally unplanned for. 1 second.
Well, Melinda, it's perfect timing because I was going to ask if you could also talk about your question about manners. I thought that was so interesting. So maybe you could do that too once Rodrigo gets back.
Yeah, and I'll preface this with including the manners question. I have 4, so I'll
Okay,
only do
great.
one at a time to allow space for other people with questions, and they're all completely unrelated. Well, related
Okay.
to, but topically.
Great. Sounds good. I'm sure he'll be excited.
Okay, apologies for that. So sorry. Now, to Melinda's question, I believe.
So I just told the group that I actually have a number of them. So I want to ask them one at a time because they're not sequential
No
logically,
worries. Yeah.
to allow other people to pop in with other questions. So I'm not monopolizing this. So I'm trying to think how best to articulate this. I'm still so new to this. It still feels like magic, weird, crazy stuff, right? And so I understand that these large language models, it is logic driven in terms of which would most likely come next in a sequence. So how does that play out in the process of imagination and creativity where you don't want the next logical step? You're looking for things that aren't necessarily logical. How does AI intersect in that space to create the unexpected and the, yeah.
Yeah, no, a great question. The real question is like, what is creativity, and how does AI account for that? AI will unfortunately do a little more than provide outputs based on the parameters you give it. So if you imagine that everything that it's creating is just generative writing, I've had it create poems, for example, that were very poor poems. They're not very good poems. Sometimes they rhyme, sometimes they don't. It depends what you're asking for. But I think instead of thinking it as a tool, thinking about it as a tool for brand new creativity, I think it serves better as a tool for helping you with your own approach before you begin the writing process. So if you think about it like an expert at questions of stasis. And here again, I come back to the rhetorical stuff that I love so much. Like a question of stasis is a moment of impasse. Like we cannot move past this moment until we agree, until we see things from the same point of view. And so in that way, it's great at giving you perspectives that you didn't imagine or giving you scenario. Like, one of the first things that I ever did with it, very silly, but with a colleague of mine, we wrote a story about a croissant. And it was told from the perspective initially of characters in the shop. And then at some point we said, I wonder if it could do it from the perspective of the croissant. And it did. It wrote a whole story about how it was just waiting there to be picked up and how all of these things happened after the fact. But the point was, I thought, how amazing to have the perspective of the croissant to at least consider, so that now we might write from the perspective of a termite, of a log of wood, a something passive that just sits there but exists. And so in that way, I'd say can spur creativity. Well, what would it sound like to follow this model, but with something different? And when you're running into a wall, it turns out AI could generate those results very easily for you to reverse engineer or analyze a response. That's how I would sort of connect it back to the critical thinking and creative thinking. I don't think that I would look to it to create something new or artistic. Rather, I would say, help me understand how I want to create my art, and that
Yeah.
relies on the rhetorical stuff.
No, that's actually really, really helpful because I think as, again, a non-user, not a digital native, I think the whole idea feels sci-fi and that it is about taking over all creativity and stuff like that. So that's
Mhm.
actually a really helpful distinction, that it is about ideation,
Mhm.
next steps. I love that about getting unstuck. I have a
Absolutely.
really technical question, if no one else has a quick one. Your slides that I pulled up on under the Gamma app,
Mhm.
it's still just online. These are slides online. Are those downloadable? And
I
when you
can,
create something in
yeah,
this,
yeah, you can download them as PDFs. So I can actually download it as a PDF, and I'll upload it to the group if that's more helpful. The website gamma.app is an AI powered, call it a layer two if you like to think about AI just as the base layer, and then this is using the LLM to then do something else. So Gamma is a tool that I've suggested to students even they could use it to create presentations, because I'm not really judging them based on presentations in my classes. I'm judging their writing, their, critical thinking, their. So if they want to use it to streamline the framework for their presentation, I show them my own presentations and I say, well, look, I did it too. Here you go. But then it's about improving what's there. It's not just, well, here's the output and you submit that. No, how can you make it the type of presentation that you're looking to make? And then did AI help you get there is how I think about it. So,
But it's not living in
it just lives
Gamma
online.
app.
No, it just lives. Yeah, it lives online.
It does. It does. It lives in the cloud.
It
Okay.
lives behind your account. Yeah. So it does
Okay.
require a Gmail account to access the site or whatever password you set. So it would be hosted on the site. You can, stream it from the site. You can share it from the site. And
Interesting.
it is an unpaid, like I'm not paying for Gamma. So I try to use tools that are free to show what is possible. There are paid options in Gamma, and you can buy credits to do stuff with AI. But you can also just use it like a regular PowerPoint without AI. So it can just make slides for you very easily.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to jump in with my last one. I'm going to come back to the
please.
question I asked in the chat about manners. I noticed in one of your examples in your prompts, you had said, hi GPT, I think, and then you also said, please. And I'm curious if in your playing around with it, Chris had indicated he had checked with something like that and didn't see any difference. But is that just because you feel like you're engaging with a sentient thing, or for fun, or what's that about?
No, that's a great question, and I'm glad that is a key question of wait, should I be saying pleases and thank yous to the AI machines? For me, it's more about intentionality is all. I've seen articles come out this is really where it came from. I've seen articles come out about how people were talking to Siri and to Alexa and the whole idea that you could have an interaction, a back and forth that was very commanding and domineering and do what I said. And of course you can treat AI that way. Of course you could. For me, it's more about what type of intention do I have? And when others see my own usage, will they wonder why I'm being polite to the machine? It's just about common sort of discourse for me. It's about the discourse patterns that I appreciate, that I think should be promoted in day-to-day conversation, whether it's a machine you're talking to or a person. And so, I use the pleases and thank yous for that reason. I have noted that there is no real, no real difference in the results. If you tell it, do what I said now, it'll still do what you said. If you said please or thank you, it won't really make a difference. But at the very least, for me, it's about the question that you just asked. It really is about why. Why do you do that? And for me, it's about intentionality. If I carry the same type of intentionality in my day-to-day and in my interactions with this machine that nobody will ever see, then you can be sure I'm thinking about that type of stuff when I'm engaging out in the social world with actual people who will think about what I've said. So that's all. It really doesn't go beyond that. And it's not supposed to be like a virtue signal call where I'm superior to those of you who have not done that. But no, instead, I really believe in the powers of discourse. I really think that a good understanding of rhetoric and linguistics and how we process language and how we use it actively in performances is what I consider when I engage with it. Thank you for that question.
No, thank you. I'm going to pause for other questions because I do have one more, but I'll pause. But thank you for that. Your answer actually is like, oh, that's more for discussion. That could be interesting. So I'll take a minute.
For sure. Chris?
I just wanted to comment to Melinda, if you go back into Rodrigo's presentation and some of the prompts that he presented, you'll notice when he gets into the more complex prompts, he starts giving ChatGPT a specific role. Because when you look at ChatGPT, you have to understand ChatGPT, or actually the large language model, has been trained on the entire internet. And when you look at the underlying model, it's just it's set as a role as your personal assistant. And so when you treat it as a vague, arbitrary, your personal assistant, you run the risk of getting arbitrary results. And the key to success is understanding context and specificity. When you give it a specific role on something that you're trying to focus on, let's say you want to climate change. I wouldn't want to ask ChatGPT from your personal assistant arbitrary role. I want to approach ChatGPT from someone that's in the sciences and has experience. I can't think of a role of that off the top of my head right now, but as a scientist that is experienced in climate change, here are my questions. Here are the things that I need to sit there and go through. If you do it there and treat it as a role and establish the context of what you're trying to achieve, you're going to get much better results like Rodrigo shared. I just want to make that comment.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The role playing part is essential. And just to kind of link it back, the reason I love AI so much, it's almost self-serving. I've been teaching my 101 classes from the framework of rhetorical training and the discourse of performance for a very long time. So when I think of performance and the role playing that you just mentioned and the ways to approach rhetorical situations that I've always tried to teach to students, it turns out all that stuff would make them better prompters. So great, let's work at the fundamentals of syntax. Let's work at the fundamentals of grammar. Let's work at these specific, detailed instructions that will lead to more impressive outputs. So absolutely, to Chris's point, you need those specific details. You need to give it a point of view to speak from. You need to give it even who it's speaking to, right? Who's your audience here, and how will you speak to them? How will you persuade them? What will they find persuasive? I mean, these are questions that I've been asking students for a very long time. So thinking of them of the same questions now with the machines, it just ends up being a real focus on the patterns of discourse, right? To Chris's point, if you're asking it to speak like an expert scientist, it's because it will understand that an expert scientist sounds a certain way and would frame things a certain way and not another way. And that right there is what I think is essential about mastering AI.
We have a question from Meredith in the chat. And then one other thing, George had shared a really interesting application. And so if we have time after Meredith's question, it would be awesome to hear a bit more about that.
Yeah, for sure. I think I saw the application was for a play or something, right? Something creative, which is really cool. I definitely would love to hear about that. What was Meredith's question? Oh, I see the
Meredith,
workflow.
do you want to jump in or do you want me to read it?
Yeah, please do.
Okay, I'm seeing Meredith muted, so I'll go ahead. So Meredith writes, can you speak to the use of AI and improvements to workflow in an office setting? Any resources would be helpful.
Yeah, definitely. I could simply speak to my own experience, obviously doing my academic work and then moonlighting, in other freelance jobs or things of that nature outside of my work hours. But as far as reports go, as far as planning, strategizing, brainstorming ideas, visualizing processes, all of that now I do actively with AI. Not because I have to. I could spend time just sitting there by myself doing the work. That's the type of thinking that I do with my students day to day. I tell them the same thing, but it will speed things up a bit, which I think is the point here. Is if I speed up the planning, maybe I have more time to talk to the student. I have more time to really sit down and go over a draft, or go over their revision, or go over their plan for their next paper, or go that type of stuff. I've definitely started to do with AI. So if I have reports of any kind, you don't need very much else than ChatGPT itself and an understanding of who your audience is and what it is that you're producing, reports, any sort of data analysis. Planning really is where I default to as a teacher, right? So like a clear example, I'm teaching a novel in my classroom. It's called Inherit the Wind. there is an activity in that in the very intro section of that play, there is a letter that is written by one of the characters, and it goes out to the Baltimore Herald so that they can respond and provide some assistance. Excuse me. And often I've had students just write the letter yourself. Hey, take on the guise of this person and write the letter and tell me what you would say in order for them to help you. This time around, instead, what I did was I produced 3 letters using AI. And then I had students evaluate which one would be the most persuasive. And so we got to talk about rhetoric and persuasive strategies and AI composition, and determine that these 3 responses were produced by a single writer. And that became the conversation that we had. It was a streamlined discussion. And so I just want to emphasize that for me, it's about time and efficiency. If I can streamline processes, it's using the GPT. If I can streamline the creation of an outline, an agenda, I mean, a great tool that we'll be going over in more detail, I think in the 4th presentation, is EduAid. EduAide is a great tool. EduAid. It's something. It's basically there built as a solution for educators to streamline your pedagogy, your planning. Your hey, maybe you don't know how to do a jigsaw activity. Click the jigsaw button, put in your subject. It'll give you the activity. Like that type of stuff is out there now. But the idea is you have to find the tools, in my opinion, that are not turning you into a consumer, right? That are turning you into an AI producing individual, someone who can use the base technology to achieve similar results, and much better if you can do it for free, right? The goal here is not to turn students into consumers, from my point of view, rather understand how these tools work and encourage them to use them to improve their outputs. But that one will be showcased in the 4th presentation. And there are other tools that you can look for. One of the sites that I would recommend is actually called futuretools.io. It's linked there in the chat. You need that S. Futuretools.io, and there's so many free, paid, premium resources available there. You really can choose them based on whatever you want to do with them. Explore and definitely let me know which one you looked at and how it was great or terrible, right? And I think Melinda said she had a follow-up question, but I'm not sure if it's been asked.
Yeah, so it's in the chat, but George mentioned that he may need to run. So could we have
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah,
and then
of course.
Melinda, we will come back to your question.
Hi, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
All right, great. Yeah, well, I'll be brief too. It's this is an excellent presentation, Rodrigo. This is so very cool. Last semester, the Dramatic Arts program at Mesa, we embarked on a journey to do a collaborative creative project with AI. We called it the Nexus Project. So we went out and said, let's see if we can co-author and produce something. And for our purpose, it was like, okay, where do we maintain the human voice and where do we lose it? Because we're all theater people, and we're like, okay, we need to express the humanity of it. But when we're talking about AI, a thing that works with algorithms and what's out there and available, it's interesting. But we also realize that we operate in that way as well to a certain degree. And when I was in graduate school, I'll date myself, it was one of the first times I started to write with a computer. And I remember thinking how I was writing was being renovated by the way I was interfacing with the computer. So not a bad thing. I think it actually made my writing a little bit better and more structured. But in any case, we needed something to guide the process. So we said, let's form 3 questions. And question 1 was, how is AI a friend or a benefit? How is AI an enemy or a detriment to our humanity? And how is AI just a tool? And everybody just went out for a few days and started to interact and do all this kind of writing and prompting. And some people developed longer prompts. They developed like what you were doing, is like, let's go for a longer prompt. Some people just had long conversations. And as they kept on the same topic and had those conversations with the chatbot, it developed into some interesting things. But we had different pieces. Some were 100% authored with a relatively short prompt. I think one student said, please help me generate a letter to a woman on her wedding day from her dead grandfather. And it turned out to be very touching. You know, it was actually pretty good. If you read it, it might be a bit stale. It's kind of like, okay, there's, you know, you can always sense a bit of humanity missing in this thing. But when we brought it to stage and brought it to rehearsal, of course, the inescapable essence of a human voice in performance under lights highlighted it in a different way. So it was a very cool process. I've got the script if anybody ever wants it, and you can look at it. And we just kind of explored it in the staging too. So of course we meddled with whatever it said by manipulating the text with live performance. But it was an interesting journey, and we used AI with the poster, with the graphics, with generating promotional materials, and all that kind of stuff. So we dove in hard, and I think came out on the other side thinking we should do it again at a later date. You know, because at the very end of the piece, we ended with this a character who was kind of AI. It was comedic at times, but also very scary. And at the tail end, all the humans get kind of taken over by the voice, and they end up kind of going to this pose that worships the AI. And our final projected graphic was a quantum computer, you know, to say what's gonna happen later on with higher computing power and more accessible data everywhere. But yeah, I'll send you the script, Laura. But I don't need to share more than that. Just that we took a creative deep dive last semester and learned a lot. And it was also pedagogical because, like you say, the whole purpose, I think, what you're telling us is that it was designed to say, okay, even now today, when we're coming up on elections, perhaps, what's truth, what's false? How do we decipher things rhetorically? Because, you know, regardless if it's coming from a computer screen or not, it's communication, it's information, and it's text against text. It's us against whatever we're receiving. And we need to figure out how to negotiate that with logic, observation, and humanity. So that was kind of our venture as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I just got to say, I love that example so much. I was familiar with it from the emails that came through. I saw when y'all were putting on that production, and I thought it was a fantastic application, creative, and just acknowledging what the tool is capable of doing. And I think, again, coming from this sort of performance pedagogy background and what I tend to do in my day to day, I've always appreciated the power of performance. So I use plays in my class for this exact reason. And the point that you delivered was the absolutely essential one. AI could have produced this script, but it can't perform it. Not like a human can. Now with the emotional raw power that the voice and the performance and the mannerism can do. And this is what a dramatist knows. And so, and I appreciate that perspective, George, the fact that you guys did that. I actually would love if you were willing to have this as part of the publication that I mentioned for Inside English. That'd be awesome to publish with the script and the examples from the student writing, giving absolutely credit to everyone who took part in that, and just showcasing what we're doing here at the local district. I mean, it is a global conversation at this point.
Happy to share. Just reach out.
Very cool.
Thanks.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And thank you everybody again for joining us here. I do see, let's see.
So Melinda was up next. Melinda, do you want to jump in, or do you want me to read the question?
Oh, that's right, the third and final question.
And Chris responded to it, which I think helped me understand it better. It had to do with the, you mentioned proofreading. And I was like, well, how do you even upload something to be proofread, which clarified, like if it's a paid subscription, you have a file. And just a clarification, it would then be something akin to saving something on my laptop or my desktop, right? No one else has access to it, or saving it into a file that's part of a bigger system. So I can tell Chat GPT or wherever else that this is private. It's only going to live in this space.
Yes and no. So yes, but no, because then the data becomes a part of the general data set. And so this is why I suggested that if you're going to at all consider using student work, it should replace names. It should be with full acknowledgement of the students about what's going in. I mean, I suggest not to do that. But if it is with the students in mind, if it's collaborating in some way, that's a different conversation. But yeah, no, the data becomes a part of the general data set that can feed into So along comes that same student and requests an answer from something that was in the essay, and the AI would be able to spit it back out because it would be part of its data set.
So many bigger questions. Like, what's to stop if you're just keep build? This has to be happening. This huge data set. There have to be whole areas of people who are feeding disinformation.
Oh yeah,
which could
absolutely.
skew then the
It's
outputs
on the entire internet. So the entire internet, I think up to July of 2023 right now.
Yeah, and that was a big thing with the original ChatGPT too. Was like it was only trained through 2021 data. So for a long time, people were very frustrated about, oh, it can't give me relevant results, right? But then it was updated to 2022 and now 2023. So the idea is you're adding to its base data, but what will come around is more like what we're seeing with consensus and these smaller chatbots, these smaller language models, as opposed to the large language models that will have more finite amounts of data to work from. So they'll be more accurate too, right? Hallucinations really are a feature of having the entire internet, to Chris's point, as part of your data set. But if you're working off of a very streamlined data set, then it's gaining more accuracy over time is sort of the idea. But related back to your question about if I'm looking at it here clearly, actually no, I guess the question really was about which tools to use. So I hope that that was answered. I hope that the perspective on what we're doing overall and the ethos that we're trying to set with these technologies and these tools is clear. Yeah, is there any final questions? I know we're coming up here on the timeline time.
There's always so many things to talk about this topic. We could be here forever.
Be here next week. Join us next week. We'll be talking about art from words. So next the next presentation will be a co-presentation with my colleague Josh Alley, who's an art historian. And we've got some AI bots and a few AI things to show you all. But essentially that conversation is about where the art world sort of intersects with all of this. And of course, conversations on artistic plagiarism and stylistic copycatting and all of those things that very much go into being an artist and having these tools here now and not quite understanding what is the role of an artist beyond the age of AI. If AI can produce really, really awesome art, so that conversation is coming next week. And then we've got another 3. I mean, we're at the halfway point. As of that point, we'll be talking to some specific businesses that are using AI. We'll be doing a student panel for one of them that will be on Community Day, April 5th. So we'll have a student panel. I'll do a preview of AI Demystified, and then we'll have a student panel. And then the last one connects AI to the larger conversation of Web3 technologies, like we said somewhat at the beginning of this one. So yeah, thank you guys for being here. I appreciate everyone who shows up, and definitely appreciate all the perspectives that you bring, all the questions that you give to me help me think about my own framing as well. And it's great to see the conversation growing across the district. So thank you all very much for attending. Have a great day.